Here we go once again with my Killa tape at. We're in season 2, episode 12. Word is born. We're gonna split it in two. We are going to talk about the Infinity War. This is gonna be spoiler-free review. So check it out. You know how we get down with that review. Just a spoiler-free review, so you can pass this one on if you haven't watched it yet. And then we are going to talk about Bill Cosby and the verdict, and his conviction. So there's going to be some other things thrown in there. We're only going to keep the health segment, so prepare yourself for that. But we're also going to talk a little bit about the prison industrial complex, and we're going to shout out K-Dot, aka Kung Fu Kenny. Word, let's do this.
Yes, I like the rhymes.
All of us are born with the miraculous ability to determine the direction from which sounds approach us.
Let us venture into new and uncharted land.
People get shook up, when I'm introduced as God.
You got that good hair, too.
You're the first one out there with a dashiki talking that crap.
It's like a jungle sometimes, it makes me wonder how I keep from going under. It's like a jungle sometimes, it makes me wonder how I keep from going under.
I pull up, hop out, arrow, made it look sexy. They won't take me out my element. Nah, take me out my element.
For this episode of Where My Killa Tape At, I've been sipping on this Cucumber Farmhouse by, I hope I pronounce this right, Uinta Brewing, U-I-N-T-A. And it's an ale brewed with cucumbers and aged in gin barrels. It is delicious. Oh my God. I highly recommend it. Earth, Wind, and Beer. Word. So you know how we do the reviews here on Where My Killa Tape At. We go talk about the good, and then we talk about the bad and the ugly. Just a FYI, there are no spoilers in here again, just to give you a heads up on that. So you can listen to this. And I also want to say that before we start, you should have watched the MCU movies, or the others 18 MCU movies before watching Infinity War. Like, you should. I know. For example, the first time I went with my mentor, and there was a couple of movies that he missed. He didn't see all of them, and he definitely didn't see all of the end credit scenes. And he was lost. You had to consistently tell him where everything was or whatever. The second time I went with my family, and my wife came with me. Now she has only seen the 2 Guardians movies, the Black Panther, and she did see Avengers 1, I believe, because I've seen that 20 times. So I think she sat down and watched that with me. So she didn't watch the end credit scene. Oh, she did. We made her. But she was lost. Now, she enjoyed the movie. Don't get me wrong. She enjoyed it. But she got everything twisted. She thought Wakanda was over here. She admitted, yo, I was lost. And I think it's because of the dialogue of the movie. The dialogue really, the witty banter between people was, hilarious. And they made a lot of 80s references. So she loves the 80s. So that worked out for her. But if you haven't watched this, then you might want to go watch the other MCU movies as well as the end credit scenes, because this really ties in. Number 2, I will say this, that the movie itself, it's not the typical movie. There are no 3 acts or 4 acts or 5 acts. Really, the entire movie is pretty much 1/3 act. 1/3 act really is what it is. And there's so much action going on. There's so many twists that it seems like it's just a 3rd act. And that's why it's important that you watch at least Avengers number 1 with the end credit scene. Then watch Avengers number 2, right? Because that's when they introduce the Vision. And then watch the end credit scene there. And then Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, especially when Nebula is in different scenes with Gamora. Because there's a reason why they're fighting. And then you have to watch the end credit scenes there, as well as, let me see, what's the other movie you got to watch? You got to watch Thor Ragnarok. You really have to watch that because of the Hulk. So you see that, you can definitely see the movie. So here we go with the good of Where My Killer Tape At for the Infinity War movie. Now, let me just say this. Shout out to the Russo brothers, because they had a huge undertaking. They had to take everything from the previous 18 MCU movies, all the little bits and pieces, and put it together, right? In this one big culminating piece. Let me say this has never been done before. This is like the first time this has been done in the history of Hollywood. So the screenwriting, whoever, man, they did their thing, man. That's all I'm gonna say. On top of that, for example, Thanos. Like, a lot of people didn't know who Thanos. If you don't read the comic books, you don't really know who Thanos is, right? Because he shows up in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, right? And he's in the end credit scenes of Avengers 1 and 2. He's mentioned several times in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. So you don't really have much to work with if you don't read the comic book. So they had to bring in this villain and make him multi-dimensional in a short amount of time. I mean, don't get me wrong. 2 hours and 40 minutes. That's how long the movie is a long time, right? But to do that, have action, bring in all the other characters, tremendously ambitious. And then on top of that, the format of the movie, I mentioned it earlier. It's not the typical 1 act, 2 act, 3 act. It's not the typical one that you see in most action movies nowadays, right? It's literally an entire 3rd act. And that's pretty much what it is. So I got to give them shout outs for that, because that was ambitious. It was a big gamble. And I think for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I think it paid off. The pacing, incredible. I assume, since this is a 2-parter, I assume that Thanos is going to get half the Infinity Stones in this movie, or most of them, and then finish it off in the second movie, and end like he does what he does at the end of this movie, like towards the middle of the second part, and then the heroes rally and everything. That's not what happened. He got all Infinity Stones in this, right? So, and if you look at the trailers only show him in every battle that he's in. He only has 2 of them on the gauntlet. So that they really threw us off with that. So they had, just imagine, just incredible pacing, because there's about 10 locales in this movie. That's incredible. The pacing was just incredible to do that. And here's why it pays off. And it's probably what the problem with the Justice League was. It pays off because you had all these previous MCU movies that if you watch them, you know who these characters are. You're already familiar with them. They don't have to tell you their backstory. You already know that Doctor Strange has one of the Infinity Stones in the Eye of Agamotto. You know that. You don't need to do that, right? You already know that the Collector has the Infinity Stone from Thor 2, right? Because they gave it to him in Thor Dark World 2 in the end credits, right? So you know where all the mostly all of the Infinity Stones are. So you know where that is. You realize that if you watch Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, you know where the 6th one, which was the Soul Stone, is. You know where it's at. So, and then to have all these characters working together, the team ups, amazing. Like, there were some pairings that if you told me them like these two were going to work together, I'd have been like, yeah, but they worked. They did a good job. Then the action, oh my God, the action. Like, what do you like? Do you like big space? You like big battles on the field? Do you like one-on-one choreographed battles? Do you like people using their entire power sets? What kind do you like? They had it all in here. They had all the action that you would want in here, right? And that's what I really, really appreciated. Okay, the biggest thing that I worried about was Thanos himself. Not because I think Marvel figured out how to make dope villains. I really do, thanks to Killmonger. They really figured that out. Plus, again, with Thanos, even though we didn't have a lot to go on, we kind of have a build-up up to what he was looking for, right? But the biggest thing I had to be worried about was the CGI, because he's supposed to be like, his character's like the same size as the Hulk. He's supposed to be taller than the Hulk, but kind of like the same width, right? So he was going to be in CGI the entire time. I was really worried about that, because when I noticed that if they do CGI and they use a bit here and a bit there and a bit here and a bit there, then it works very well. But when they do something consistently, it just doesn't work. And you can tell when it's CGI. With this one, you can't tell that he's CGI. I mean, he is, but you really can't tell. And I think that his presence is felt throughout the movie. Now, what I was worried about as well was the joking. I was like, oh, please don't go overboard with the joking, right? Because Thanos in the comic book is very formidable. When he comes around, people panic, people start tripping. When Thanos comes around, the stakes are high, right? So they did a good balance with this, because when Thanos does enter the scene, you're like, oh snap, it's going down. but at the same time, they allowed enough witty banter so it doesn't become too dark, right? I mean, don't get me wrong, it does get dark towards the end, but it's not dark enough where you're like the whole time like, oh my God, So DC Cinematic Universe, excuse me, you might want to start taking notes, right? Because this is how you do it. You have enough jokes that are not over the top, but yet we all know that the stakes are high and it's not a game. Like you either go home. You know how people say go hard or go home. You either go hard or you die, and that's pretty much what happens here. I think again, another thing a lot of people were worried about was just the characters. There was a lot of characters in here, right? All of us were worried that it just wasn't going to be enough. Now, don't get me wrong. There are people that have small parts in it, but overall, like the favorites, they all get a good hand in it. All the favorites really come through and they show their strengths. This is why I'm an Avenger, right? They show that. This is what makes me an Avenger. And you feel that. You're like, okay, yes, I know that you're an Avenger. This is why you're an Avenger. I mean, even War Machine does his thing, and Falcon. Like, you're like, oh, snap. They are Avengers. Now you are convinced that they are Avengers. And I think everybody does their part, and I think it all fits. So there was a lot they had to just hit on that they just had to really get, and they got it right.
It's all a game. It's all a game.
Okay, we're going to talk about the bad now. One thing that I talked about in the previous episode, when I talked about Thanos and who he is, or Thanos, however you want to call him, is the Vision and Scarlet Witch. They went there. They actually went there. Like they went there. And I know this is comic books, Danny. Like, chill. But I just never liked it. They did it. And I can see why they did it. Like, you'll see in the movie why they did it. It makes perfect sense for the tension and everything. But I just like, Now people are saying that this is something that came from Joss Whedon in Avengers #2, because he's always throwing the romance in. And the Russo brothers had no choice to kind of like play this into the story. But that's something I didn't like. The other thing I didn't like is the fact that, when Thanos first shows up, he has one Infinity Stone, which somebody says that he took it from Xandar. We know in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, Peter Quill, Star-Lord, turned it over to the Nova Corps to keep. Glenn Close, remember? And I'm kind of mad that they never showed how that happened. Now, I think a good thing was that they only had one flashback in this movie, because I would have been mad if they had like 8 or 9 flashbacks. And I think there's a reason for that. But I would like to have seen how you had done it. Like, maybe that should have been the opening scene, and then go from there. Or, maybe a quick flashback. Or it was in the end credit scene in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Because in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, they refer to Thanos all the time. He's in it. He's actually in it. But they don't. In Volume 2, he's just mentioned. And is not talked about like how he gets down. So I would like to have seen that. They said that he had laid waste to Xandar and took the stone. I would like to have seen that. Another thing I didn't like that was bad was now from the comic book, and I talked about this in the previous episode, the Black Order, which you also know is the Coal Obsidian, and those are like Thanos' generals. Now, in the comic book, they're fairly recent. They were introduced in around 2014, 2015 by Jonathan Hickman, and they're still present in the comic book, and they are very formidable. They're very powerful. Some of them have even challenged Thanos, right? But you don't know their secret origin. Like, I like that. Like, you don't know where they come from. It's alluded that they're his kids, like, and they don't even say, like, some of them they refer to as his biological, and some of them they're not his biological. He like adopted them. But in this movie, they're just not as formidable as they seem in the comic book, right? Like, they are actually, really taken care of, right, very quickly. When before they were in, the comic book, they're able to take down scores of superheroes at a time. And here they're just like, henchmen. They might as well be, overpowered henchmen that might give you a little bit of competition. So again, they could have been done better. So those are the 3 bads that I have for this movie. And now for the ugly, and it's not really, usually when I do the ugly segment of a review, it's like the really, 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 really nasty stuff. And this is not really an ugly thing. I actually kind of feel like it's not a bad thing. It's, you know what I'm saying? But I noticed that a lot of people who like don't read the comics, they were just like, at the end, they were just like, huh? And I know I'm spoiling it, and I said I wasn't going to spoil it, but they stick pretty close to the original Infinity Gauntlet story and the stuff from the Infinity series that came out a couple of years ago by Jonathan Hickman. And the Infinity Gauntlet story was written by Jim Starlin. Shout out to Jim Starlin, because that's a dope story. Probably, to me, one of the best stories to come out of the 90s in comic books, period. Because in the 90s, Marvel and DC and Image was putting out a lot of crap. But this is probably one of my favorite. And the pencils were by Ron Lim. It was really, really, really dope. But it sticks to it. So for a lot of people, I noticed a lot of people went to the theater and they were confused. And it's probably for several reasons. It's probably because, and I heard people talking, like as the movie was going on. There were people that were just completely confused at the ending, at the end credit scene. People that were confused, to some of the parts in the movie, like where they went to. They were just really confused. Maybe it's because they couldn't remember stuff that happened in the MCU movies. And I know the pacing, was pretty, even though I felt it was perfect, it was moving pretty quick. That being said, that's just probably the part that people are going to have issues with. Again, I've seen online people are confused and stuff like that. So I think that's the part that is ugly. Again, it's not a bad thing. But I just kind of feel like you can't just go see it without having some background to what's going on. And there you have it, folks. There's my review of Avengers Infinity War, which is the third Avengers movie. Word. Thank y'all. I was so excited about this news, and I didn't mention it in the previous episode, but I thought it was, we should, mention that shit. Like, K-Dot, he, Kendrick Lamar, he, Kung Fu Kenny, he got that Pulitzer Prize, and which is rare in hip hop. I don't notice. Now, I'm not even gonna say it's rare. It's never happened before, right? Because usually when they give a Pulitzer Prize to someone who does music, it's usually like jazz, something contemporary. And that's usually who they give it to. Usually it's somebody like, who is that, right? So for K-Dot to get it, man, that's just like a big score for hip hop. And I know people are like, well, Danny, that's the white gaze shit again, right? Like getting that validation from white folks. But and I kind of feel you on that. It is like a lot of times we put a lot of stock in these awards, right? Kendrick Lamar didn't set out to win a Pulitzer Prize. He just set out to put dope music. And I don't think anybody gets up in the morning and says, I'm going to write a book, I'm going to produce a work of art that is going to give me a Pulitzer. It'll be cool if you get one, right? You'll be like, it's cool if I get one, because you could take that off your bucket list, right? As an artist, you can say, I got to win a Pulitzer, right? People that do win Pulitzers usually set out to just put out dope material. But it's still dope to get that recognition. And here's how I look at it, because I know a lot of people are like, but that's white gaze. That's the white gaze. I know that, like, in my profession, like when my colleagues and my peers and my superiors, so to speak, give me recognition, when they recognize me for my work, it means a lot. It validates what I do, right? So when I hear my peers or my colleagues or my supervisor say, man, like the other day I had my former supervisor approach me. He was like, my former manager, he was like, yo, man, his words were, man, you really killing it. Like, you really killing it down there. Like, you really doing your thing. And he actually said, I never doubted you in that respect. And he actually told me, when we lost you, I was hurt, but I knew you were going to move on to bigger and brighter things. And that meant a lot to me, because it was an informal situation. And that meant a lot to me. And again, I didn't set out to do that, but it just means a lot to get that validation. So I know for Kendrick, it's a big deal. And again, it's a win for hip hop, right? Fuck it. Let's celebrate. All right, party people. What I'm gonna do next is I'm gonna talk about the Cosby verdict. As you know, that he was convicted at 3 counts. I believe it was 3 counts sexual assault, and so they're saying that he could face, I think, between 10 to 30 years. And I'm gonna say this, and I'm gonna keep saying this: he's not gonna do time. He's not, like, as much as some of us would like for him to see him do time. He's not going to do time, right? And I want to make that clear. But what happens is, and since this Cosby thing, this Me Too movement has been coming around, and this Cosby thing, people have been like bringing up these arguments. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these arguments and I'm going to debunk them slowly, right? So the first one I want to debunk is the NBC rumor, right? There's been this thing about, well, the reason why they're coming after him, meaning Dave, meaning the white man, that there's this conspiracy to get him is because he was going to purchase NBC. Now, there is some truth to that, but I think we have to be clear about what actually happened. And it's funny because I'm old enough to remember when this happened. I'm really happy, and this happened. And it's funny because I thought it was in like in '88, but actually it was in 1992. And if you go online, you can actually find this. The New York Times still has this piece. It's by this gentleman by the name of Bill Carter, and it was in the New York Times. It was a quick blurb. And here, let me just explain a couple of things. In 1986, General Electric bought NBC for the tune of $6 billion. Right? And I could be wrong in the numbers. And I remember when it happened, because it happened like in the height of the Cosby Show. So they bought that. And so a couple years later, the show ended. And by the time 1992 rolled around, it was in syndication. It was on reruns, right? So, now, what happened was Bill Cosby talked to his manager and was like, hey, I think we should buy NBC. Now, let's be clear. Bill Cosby, his net worth at the time was $300 million. That was his net worth, $300 million. Remember that NBC in 1986, 6 years before, was bought for $6 billion, right? So let's do the math there. Now, I'm not saying that Bill Cosby said, if you read the article, he didn't say I'll buy it by myself. He knew that he had to get partners. And it's kind of like the BET situation when Mr. what's his name was Bob Johnson, when he first bought the network, he had to get other people to help buy it out with him. So he had put like $30,000 down, and then he got other people to help him, and he ended up creating BET. So it would have been the same situation, it's just with bigger money, right? And so Cosby was looking for people to buy it, but what happened is, at the time, I'm trying to remember this guy, Robert Wright, he was the network president of NBC. He said NBC is not for sale. So what happened is Bill Cosby never actually pursued that venture because, it's only so, because why do the legwork if no one's going to sell it, right? So that's kind of like if I walk down the street and I see my neighbor's car and I want to buy it and I say, hey, I want to buy this, and he says it's not for sale, then that's it. That's the end of the story. So this idea there's a conspiracy for that is kind of, again, it's based in somewhat truth that he wanted to buy NBC, but there was never actually a deal. There was actually nothing put down. There was no discussion. And again, you could look it up by Bill Carter. And then ultimately, this is my thing. If the white man ain't want you to buy shit, he just won't sell it to you. Like, why does he need to create a conspiracy to do that? Like, this happens every day. There are black and brown folks that want to buy stuff in white neighborhoods, and the white real estate agents are like, oh, it's not for sale. It happens all the time. We got to get out of this, yo. Now, here's something else that a lot of people don't know. And this goes back to Hannibal Buress. Am I saying it right? Hannibal Buress. And he was the comedian a couple of years ago who was like, Bill Cosby's a rapist and he drugged women, and it kind of went on. Which again, we're seeing this happening now with R. Kelly, where you had Vince Staples say, hey, he's a rapist and he's a pedophile or whatever. And now people are like taking notice of it. And it's unfortunate that every time these things happen, women can all day at the top of the mountains below, hey, this guy's a rapist and this guy's this, and we don't pay him no mind. But as soon as a man says it, is Gucci, right? Anyway, But that's when you kind of see like the beginning of this whole Cosby thing, right? And it's before the Me Too movement. Now, what Hannibal was saying was that in the comedy world, he was known as Pill Cosby. And Hannibal's not the first one to say this. He was not the first one to say this. There have been many comedians who said that when they became comedians and people were talking and, you know, Bill Cosby was brought up, people would joke, Pill Cosby, ha 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 ha. They said he was known, and this has been said over and over again, he has been known to drug women and have his way with them. He was known for that. And you can say whatever you want to say. They shouldn't have been with him. But I don't think people like getting drugged and then somebody taking advantage of them. I really don't. I don't. Like that's like. Can we like think about that for 1 second? And then it's the funny thing is what blows my mind is that there's a testimony now which the Cosby camp had been trying to suppress for years. 2005 testimony, right? And it's funny because I had somebody say, well, you're reading it out of context. Oh, here we go, once again with context, right? They asked him, do you use Quaaludes to drug women? Which was, by the way, during the time that Bill Cosby was doing this, it was illegal, but let's neither here nor there. They asked him, do you use Quaaludes to drug women? And he said, yes. He said, yes. He said it. Like, he admitted to that, right? And that is something that they wanted to suppress, not because it was illegal, it is because they didn't want to tarnish his reputation. Because remember, the statutes of limitation are gone in a lot of these cases, right? So, you know, he was known as Pill Cosby. That's what he was known for. And that's what Hannibal was saying. Hannibal was saying that, like most black comedians and other comedians, that Bill Cosby was their hero. And they go into that profession and they find out that their hero is really a monster. And that's what he was talking about. And that's what and it's funny because even in Dave Chappelle's stand-up, he says that. He's like, yeah, you know, he was kind of known for doing this kind of stuff. And it's like, and, you know, and that's the part that hurt him, that it was true. But that being said, like, we really got to pay attention to folks, and especially women. Like, come on, dude. Also, I forgot to mention something real quick. And I had the clip and I just couldn't find it again. But there is a clip of Bill Cosby in his stand-up talking about how to get women to have sex with you, and he talks about drugging them. There's one, and then there's an interview he did with Larry King where he talked about Spanish Fly and how you use that to get women to have sex with you, which is the old school. It was like a liquid, a potion that you could buy, but they would sell it all over the place, but they never were able to actually prove that it works. So I don't know. But that was actually part of his stand-up as well. But I mean, okay, he was joking, right? But it was something that you find consistently in his stand-up and his comedy and what he was talking about. Like, and it's like, here is a man that's admitting it in his comedy and his stand-up, and he was never like, oh, I ain't get down like that though, or, you know, he got down like that, and he was surprised that other people knew about it. And it's kind of like, dude, you know, like, here's a guy that he's admitted to it, and we were defending him.
Yeah. I think Prince should run first. I think so. Yeah. I think Prince should run first.
And you know what? This is the part that trips me out, is that Cosby ain't really love black folks. And I know me and my man Seiko get into the debate all the time, right? Like there are people that say they love black women, but they actually just mean black women that fit a particular standard, right? They don't really mean like black women in the hood and stuff like that. Like, they don't mean that, or black women in corporate America. Like, they don't really love black women. You know what I mean? They just say like this particular kind of black woman. And it's the same thing with black people. Like, Cosby was known to deal in respectability politics. He was known to be someone who looked down on people from the hood. You know what I mean? I know like there was a book that I read about someone who worked on the Cosby Show, and they were talking about how he was big on everybody having a college degree, which is a good standard to have, but he didn't hire people that didn't have college degrees. That's wild, ain't it? Like, he set out to do that, right? Like, he was like, nah, I'm not going to do that. Like, he really wasn't a black capitalist like we think. He really wasn't. And I remember when he was going around of the country, and he was doing those talks about, and he was talking about people in the hood. He was talking about, really my demographics. He was talking about people that have names like, he even said it like Malik and stuff like that. And it's just like, why are we defending this dude? He ain't really love us. True indeed. He gave us two of probably the best sitcoms ever, right? The Cosby Show and A Different World. I'm not even gonna lie, right? I'm not even gonna front. There's some movies that he did that were actually dope. And you know what? I have his book on fatherhood. I read it. I got it in my library. Like, I'm not even gonna lie. But this is the same question that I asked, that we have to ask of Bam. Did he create all of this to rape people? Because while he was doing all this stuff, while he was telling us how we're supposed to act in front of white folks, away from white folks, towards each other, etc., he is probably going to go down as the biggest serial rapist in history, right? Like, think about that, yo. 60 people came forward. Most rape victims don't come out and tell on the people that did that to them. You know what I mean? So how many people are hiding? And then there are people that come out and said, he tried to get me, but I knew what was happening and I got out of there, right? So like, we will never know. But, we have to ask that question. He's guilty, party people. He's guilty. The sad part is we're not going to know who all his victims are because they're too scared to come out. And if they did, we wouldn't believe them anyway. So, again, here's someone who dealt in respectability politics. And I'm not saying because you deal in respectability politics, you should go to jail. I'm not saying because you don't love black people, you should go to jail. I don't say any of those things, right? There's a lot of people who are like that, who don't commit crimes. You know what I'm saying? Like, there are a lot of people who are like that, who don't go out there and take advantage of drug people. Like, they don't do that, right? There are a lot of people out there who are like that, who don't run around and act like they're all high and mighty. And that's really what we should question. Like, really, we should see, like, who is the real monster in all this? Who is the real perpetrator in all this? And the thing is that Cosby is that person, right? Cosby is this person who came off like he's supposed to be our TV dad, right? That he's the guy that sets the standard. This is the kind of family that you want, right? This is the kind of stuff that you should be doing. You should be going to college and everything. And at the same time, he's doing these heinous acts behind closed doors, right? And then check this out. Every day I run into someone who said he said some fly stuff to them at a college. You know what I'm saying? Like, he'll go to a commencement ceremony and he'll berate people, particularly black folks, especially when there's white people in the room. So he's someone who really, like, we need to rethink the whole Cosby thing. And then here's the last question I'm gonna ask, and I'm gonna leave it at this. There's a lot of people running around saying this is going to destroy his legacy. This is going to be the last thing he's going to be remembered for, right? But let me ask you this. If he was so worried about his legacy, right, then why did he do all this? Why did he commit all these crimes? That's the real question you used to ask yourself, right? Because I can give you other people throughout history that has done the same thing and destroyed their legacy. It wasn't because other people were gunning for them, right? It's because they went out there and they deliberately did that. And you know what the scary part is? That the kind of crimes that he commits, a lot of people commit every day, and they're never put out to light. I know what y'all thinking. Like, here's someone who's completely against the prison industrial complex, right? And I've taught classes on it. I educate people on that. I used to work in the prison industrial complex as a college educator. And you would think, like, why would you say stuff like, Cosby, got convicted? First, let me just say this. Cosby is not going to do any jail time. Let me just be frank with you on that. He will not do any jail time. Repeat, he will not do any jail time. He's just not. And that's just usually how rape cases go. Only 1 out of 1,000 rape cases go to trial. Just a FYI, look it up. But that being said, you would say, well, why would you say stuff like that? Like, why would you, why would you call for the conviction of these individuals that commit these heinous crimes, right? And there's several reasons for that. But here's my thing with that, and I'm not going to get into it here. I just feel like if we're going to talk about Cosby, we really should not talk about racial disparities, right? Like, because one of the arguments that people have is that, Cosby got convicted, but Harvey Weinstein isn't. or Woody Allen never even went to trial, right? Or all these individuals, Donald Trump, I was supposed to say 45. My bad. Like, they should be in jail. And that's true. But here's why that argument shouldn't be used, right? Because what you're saying is that, well, if white rapists get away with it, then black rapists should get away with it. If white rapists should get away with it, then brown rapists should get away with it. So it shouldn't be an argument that you use for that, right? The prison industrial complex is wrong for several reasons. One of them is that the victims actually never really received justice on so many levels, right? And oftentimes the victims are treated as perpetrators. And that's something that, yes, we need to discuss it, but I think that should be a completely different discussion than, rape culture. Like, that should be a completely different discussion. They're connected, but we just got to be careful when we use that argument. Word.
As I come back, bullets for best don't leak like Aquafina trash, nigga. These shots will swell you bigger than Katina ass, nigga. Got couple left for opio and A+. Watch how the gauge bust as I come back. Hey, Bobolina, Mr. Bob Dobalina ass, nigga. Back to get quicker and then I spit him at.
In this health segment, I'm gonna tell you a little secret that I do. That actually, man, like, you would think that it's something that's so simple and so fun. And I know I talk about it a lot, but I do this consistently. And shout out to Steph for this, because Steph always reminds me of this, because she does it. Dancing. Like, y'all know I'm a B-boy, so y'all know I dance salsa. Y'all know I dance merengue. I'm always, me and wife always going out and dancing. We just enjoy dancing. I enjoy dancing, period. And to be honest, if there's anything that I've done for my entire life that I will always remember doing from the beginning. And I remember dancing at 4 years old, right? I'm 45 now. So I remember dancing at 4 years old. I probably was dancing sooner than that, because most babies do dance, is dancing. And it's actually something that's very, very healthy. There's studies that prove it, that dancing regularly is actually very good exercise. And a lot of times, like, I remember a time when we would just dance all the time. And what I mean by that is my generation, like, we danced all the time. We had dances for every song that came out. And I remember an elder telling me that when James Brown was around, they had a dance for every James Brown song that came out. And then it's funny because, like, I remember I was watching the Watts Stacks documentary, which is a good documentary, by the way, because that record label was dope. And they put out a lot of dope stuff, and they never get any love. And they were kind of like rivals with Motown almost. But anyway, we'll talk about that later in some other time, right? So if you watch that video, look at the people in that video. Now, mind you, they ate a lot less crap than we do now, right? We eat a lot of processed food, right? This is before, like, microwaves and everything. We eat a lot of processed food that's high in sodium, et cetera, GMOs, whatever you want to call it. And they didn't eat that. But I remember, like, when I was young, my folks went dancing all the time. And it was something that everybody did. And again, I can't speak for everybody because I'm from New York City. So in New York City, you had dance halls, you had clubs, you had a lot of parties at community centers through. And I remember my parents, my mom, consistently going out with her sisters and my uncles. You know what I mean? Like, I saw that a lot. And I remember, like, we always had park jams, and we used to always go, and people would just be dancing a fool. I remember, and it's just something that I thought everybody did. So, like, to this day, I just consistently dance. Like, that's something that I do. Like, I do it every day, like Sunday through Sunday. If I'm not dancing, I dance a jig. You know what I mean? Sometimes I do videos of me dancing. I watch YouTube videos and I learn new moves and I try them and I practice them. And I'm just consistently dancing. My students always show me new dances and I try it. And this is something that really, this is a secret that I have that keeps me limber and it keeps me moving. And I recommend it. I recommend it to everybody. I know people laugh at the people that do, like, learn how to dance like a stripper to lose weight, or learn how to dance on the pole. Those things are great. You know how hard it is to dance on a pole? I've tried it. There's a lot of things I could do on a pole, but I cannot dance on a pole. And it's a workout. It really is a workout. So I highly recommend people taking those classes, right? And I always tell people, like, the thing about these things is, and I'm not trying to take nobody's money away, but, like, do these classes for like 6 months, and then if you consistently just do the basics, that's all you really need, and you could just add on later on. And it's just, if you don't have that much money, you feel me? So I always dance a jig. It's something that's really good. It's a good idea. If you get up in the morning and twerk, I know people laugh at me when I say that, but I know people that do that and they just, like, And, you know, it's just like they look great. And they'll tell you that, like, yeah, I just twerk in the morning when I get up. And I know this sounds crazy, but it's true. So dance regularly. And it's something that you like to do. It don't even feel like work. Like, you know, it's like, man, like, but, you know, let me say this. If you're in your 40s, right, if you're in your 30s, dance an entire salsa song. Like, dance an entire, you will be tired. You will be sweating. Let me tell you that right now. I can do 3 or 4 straight, but trust me on that. It is, you will be sweating. It is a workout. So that's it for me in my health segment. Word. Definitely want to talk about Chiquisha Clemens. And Chiquisha, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, is a young woman who was first sexually assaulted and then arrested by the police in Alabama at Waffle House. So it's funny because we all kind of like canceled Starbucks after that situation in Philadelphia, but we haven't canceled Waffle House yet. I don't know why. Now, I must warn you that if you see the video, I only watched like the first 4 seconds of it. It's very triggering, so I don't recommend watching it or reposting it anywhere. But when I first watched it, you know, the police officer was groping her. He was groping her. So that's sexual assault. And, you know, that justice needs to happen. But again, it goes back to this whole thing where if we're talking about justice for black folks or we're talking about Black Lives Matter, we should mean all Black Lives Matter, right? It shouldn't just be black men, right? Or black boys. It should be black women, LGBT, trans women, et cetera, those that are crippled. Crips and all that. So, like, we got to really be about it. We got to be really about the business for justice and reparations. Then we have to mean it for everybody. Can't just mean it for some people. So definitely let's cancel Waffle House. Down with it. I never liked the place anyway. So let's cancel it. Let's get rid of it. Let's stop fucking with them. Word is born. Of course, my favorite part of the show, the shout outs, where my Killa tape at. Definitely got a shout out on my man Sean Shot, the photographer. He hooked me up with some Rise of the Black Panther variants, and I forgot to shout him out last time. So yo, shout out to you, my brother. And also shout out to the Gem City Marketplace. That's the power is always in the people. The power is always in the people. And it's a bunch of us in the community, you know, hundreds of us who are pooling our money and our resources together to open up a healthy, a sound, sustainable market in the west side of Dayton because it's needed, because there's no supermarkets on that side. So definitely, man, glad to be on the team. Shout out to my wife for putting it on. It's dope. I love it, man. The power is in the people. And finally, shout out to my man Coda Fed. It's been a minute. Again, he always comes in and saves a day, like Captain America. I love you, brother. So we're gonna get it in. And with that, that's the end of our shout outs for where my Killa tape at. Peace.
The name of the game is light works. Light up the slips. The name of the game is light works.
So there you have it. Episode 12 of season 2 of Where My Killa Tape At. Thank you very much. If you want to continue the discussion, use the hashtag Where My Killa Tape At. Killa is pronounced Killa. I appreciate y'all for listening and showing me love. I appreciate the DMs, the tweets, the emails. Thank y'all for that. Really, really do. If you want to get me on the Twitters, hit me up at DANTRESOMI. That's at Dan Trezomi, or at Omi's Podcast, OMIS Podcast. I really appreciate y'all, man. Thank y'all for the love. Enjoy it. We'll be back next week. We got some bangers for you, man. Next week we'll be bringing you the actual review of Infinity War, but it's going to be filled with spoilers, so we could change our format a little bit. But until then, man, y'all be easy. Peace.
It's time